Yo, what's going on, y'all? Welcome to the channel, and if you're coming from TikTok, then welcome back at MonkeyKingBets. We're posting full card betting breakdowns on YouTube now, and this one is the UFC Vegas 85. So let's go. First up on the bout order for UFC Vegas 85, we got Thomas Peterson versus Jamal Pogues. Now, Thomas Peterson looked good. He was a Dana White's Contender Series fighter this last series. And I think that he looked great against Chandler Cole, but it was Chandler Cole at the end of the day. And I think Jamal Pogues is a much different threat. He can actually strike. He has a thundering jab. I think he can actually out-wrestle Thomas Peterson. I think he'll get into top position if that wrestling ever happens. And yeah, I'm going with Jamal Pogues. I think he's like plus 150 on most books. I'm slamming 3 units on that. Next up on the bout order, we got Landon Quinones versus Markel Medeiros. And for this fight, I think I'm going to have to go with Markel Medeiros. I think he wins by KO or decision, the double chance bet. And yeah, Quinones is a scrappy fighter. He has a lot of grit, and he showed that against Haqparast. But I think the short notice played a factor. I think him coming in on short notice played a huge factor. And I think that this is going to be a fight where Markel Medeiros, he blitzes early on. He hits Quinones with some big shots. And I think Quinones, if he does survive, he's going to turn up the volume in round 3. He's a scrappy fighter, and he's going to try to win over the fans. Next up on the bout order, we got Luana Carolina versus Julia Stolyarenko. And the way I see this fight, I think that Luana Carolina is a very offense-based, touch-and-go type of kickboxer. And I think that Stolyarenko is going to find a way to take down Carolina because she stands so tall. And she relies on her hands, even whenever she's on the back foot, like trying to get away. Her defense is her hands. That's how I see her. And I think Stolyarenko is going to be able to find a way to get this fight to the ground, work her ground game, and possibly submit Carolina. I'm not sure, but I'm definitely confident on that money line of Stolyarenko's. Minus 120, I think, is where it was at last time I saw it. I'm putting 3 units on that. Next up on the bout order, we got Lee Jung-young versus Blake Builder. And honestly, I really like Lee Jung-young's power advantage in this one. I think he has a sound grappling base, and he showed that. And I think Builder's a little bit better in terms of footwork, like moving around, circling. I think he does a good job of getting away from the power hand whenever he needs to. But I think once Lee lands a couple of power shots, I think Blake will be fighting not to lose. Because we saw that against Kyle Nelson. Kyle Nelson landed a few times, and all of a sudden Builder was fighting different, you know? He was fighting a little bit like sloppier, kind of like looked like he was landing points instead of really like taking the guy's head off. So, yeah, I think Lee Jung-young by KO/decision, that's worth a sprinkle. Moving on up the card, we got Themba Gorimbo versus Pete Rodriguez. I don't know if I said the first name correctly, but yeah, Themba Gorimbo, UFC has been pushing him like crazy. Like, this guy has a crazy rags to riches story. He's an amazing person too. He went back to his village back home and really like distributed his wealth there, did a lot for his village. So great guy, but I'm not here to make picks based on sob stories. That's my thing, you know? That's my thing. I honestly think that Pete Rodriguez wins this fight. I think he comes from a family of fighters. He has great ground and pound. I think Gorimbo has a tendency to accept bottom position. Like, he'll accept bottom position to get the fight to the ground because he feels confident that he can submit you. But I don't think that's something that you can do against Pete Rodriguez, because if you do that, I think Pete Rodriguez is going to start hammer fisting you and hitting you. And yeah, I like the value on his money line. It's plus 200. I like 2 units on that. Moving on up the card, we got Azat Maxim versus Charles Johnson. And for this fight, it's honestly, if the fight to go the distance odds don't look great, I'm staying away from this fight. If you put a gun to my head and told me I had to pick one, I would have to go with Azat Maxim. But that's just because I don't think Charles Johnson is a very reliable fighter for bettors. And yeah, like, Azat Maxim, he has pretty good stand-up. I think he should catch Charles Johnson a few times. I would stay away from the money lines. I'm looking for fight to go the distance to come out. But yeah, there's just so many question marks surrounding this flyweight division, and it's like a carousel of close fights. Moving on up the card, we got Molly McCann versus Diana Belbita. And if you guys didn't know, they already fought before, but this is a rematch, and Molly McCann won by decision in the last fight. Unanimous decision, that is. And I think that Molly McCann has honestly made positive strikes in her positive strides in her striking. That was a tongue twister. But I think that she's going to bounce back here. Even though she hasn't looked great in her last couple of fights, they've been against good people, so let's not completely discredit her. You know, Erin Blanchfield is a killer. And yeah, like I think that she should bounce back here. I'm sprinkling on this fight on Molly McCann by KO. I don't know if it happens, but that's how I think that this fight should play out. Moving on up the card, we go into the main card now, where we'll be starting off with Gilbert Urbina versus Charles Radke. Now for this fight, Gilbert Urbina is mad underrated. He has great distance management. His record definitely does not speak to how good of a skilled fighter he is. But honestly, we got to really break this fight down because I've been seeing a lot of people saying Urbina is a lock because Charles Radke absolutely sucks. He sucked against Blood Diamond, you know? So I really had to put a microscope to this. Like Urbina is a killer in round one. He's one of the best fighters you've ever seen in round one. That's how I feel personally. But I think that he has a tendency to settle too much into the fight, and he becomes a little bit weaker and weaker and just less of a threat as the fight goes on. And I think this is dangerous against someone like Charles Radke, who has a tendency to actually do the opposite. He's very hyper aware of the present situation on the scorecards. He'll take one shot to land two. And yeah, I think that this fight, the way I would bet on this fight is sprinkling Charles Radke by split decision. You heard me correctly. Charles Radke by split decision. I would sprinkle not even half of a unit. I would sprinkle quarter unit on that. Moving on up the card, we go on to this next bout. Aliaskhab Khizriev versus Makhmud Muradov. Now, Makhmud is one of these fighters who he seems like a very experienced striker, and he will land bombs throughout the fight, trust me. But Aliaskhab Khizriev, he has great takedowns. He's very experienced at grappling. His conditioning doesn't wane as much as Makhmud Muradov, and that's why I think that Makhmud, even though he does land bombs, in round two he's going to start to wilt. And whenever he starts to wilt, I think Aliaskhab Khizriev is going to take advantage of that. He's going to eventually take him down, work some ground game, get to his back, maybe get a rear naked choke in. That's the specific submission that I'm eyeing. But my official pick for this fight is Aliaskhab Khizriev to win by submission, and that's half of a unit. Moving on up the card, we got Viviane Araujo versus Natalia Silva. And the odds for this fight are all the way messed up. I like Natalia Silva to win. That's the final line. I think that she's the better MMA fighter. But this is a women's MMA fight, and anything can happen in women's MMA, to be honest. And yeah, I don't know who wins. I have Natalia Silva, but I would not bet on Natalia Silva. I would just stay away because those odds are crazy. There's no way I'm taking minus 300 for Natalia Silva. So hell no, stay away. Moving on up the card, we got Randy Brown versus Muslim Salikov. And for this fight, I got Randy Brown winning this fight by decision. I'm fairly confident on that. I think Randy Brown is due an easier matchup after seeing him getting knocked out in Looney Tunes fashion against Jack Della Maddalena. I think he's due an easier matchup, and I think Salikov is that easier matchup. I think Randy Brown's going to be able to use his effective little hand fighting to manage the distance, and I think he's going to land that jab, just outstrike him on points on the scorecards. I would put 1 unit on Randy Brown by decision. Moving on up the card to the co-main event of UFC Vegas 85, which is Renato Moicano versus Drew Dober. And the Crimson Chin returns. I don't think that this is a good matchup for Drew. I don't. I think Renato Moicano is definitely getting a lot better. He's really starting to find his rhythm at lightweight. I think that he's going to be able to effectively manage distance. I think he's going to be able to clinch up whenever Dober gets close, work the fight to the ground, maybe threaten a couple of submissions. And yeah, I think he's just too skilled he's too complete of an MMA fighter to be losing to somebody like Drew Dober. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound disrespectful when I say that. My official pick for this fight is Renato Moicano by submission or decision, double chance, 1.5 units. And now For the main event of UFC Vegas 85, we have Nasruddin Imavov versus Roman Dolidze. And honestly, I've been pondering this fight for a while. Like, I'm like, why do the odds look like the way that they do? And I can't figure out why. Like, honestly, Roman Dolidze, I don't think he's a great striker. I think he's sloppy, and I think he gets bailed out by his power. I think that's really what it is. And Roman Dolidze, like, whenever he goes up against Nasruddin, I think Nasruddin is just going to have a field day just kickboxing him to a decision and just winning that way. So, yeah, I think that Imavov is a hammerable line. It's 5 units on that line for me. It's at minus 160. And yeah, there we have it. That was my full card UFC Vegas 85 betting breakdown, full card predictions. And let me know in the comments down below if you guys have any picks that you guys disagree with. And yeah, I'm going to laugh at you whenever you lose. Make sure to cop the Monkey King swag, www.monkeykingbets.com, to support the channel. I'll see you guys later. Peace.